Being human.
Since Joker has been described as catnip for Batman's toxic masculinity fandom, we wanted to discuss early socialization of negative masculine ideals. A recent article from the American Psychological Association states that by looking at the development of aggression throughout childhood, we know not only do aggressive behaviors emerge at an early age, they also tend to persist over time without early preventative intervention. The socialization of the male characteristics, such as toughness, stoicism, and a lack of emotional sensitivity, also onsets at an early age, making it a prime time period for preventative intervention. So, Jonathan, my Asian friend, what are your thoughts on these findings?
Well, it's interesting. I thought about what would be the best metaphor or analogy for young men and violence. And I think it really has to do with a family that has an alcoholic uncle. Everybody knows it, but nobody talks about it. And I really feel like our culture right now is struggling to have thoughtful conversations about young men. Mm-hmm. It's become way over politicized and it's become very extreme rhetoric. Listen, we know violence in men outnumbers violence from women. We know that even though women attempt suicide more often than men complete suicide more often because they generally choose violent means. So we know that men have higher rates of ADHD, learning disorders, behavioral problems in school. This isn't politicized. This is the data. These are the numbers. And so if we know that young men struggle with violence, how do we find earlier prevention opportunities to really develop their social and emotional resiliency and skills to help them find appropriate ways to deal with conflict and not feeling particularly distressed or angered in a way that they don't lash out at others? I've never done a risk assessment on a female. I've only done risk assessments on young men. What's your experience working with young men and violence?
Well, I'll add to that what you're talking about is one of my favorite books is called Raising Cain.
Yes.
And one of the takeaways from that book for me is at an early age, being able to hug your child, using emotional language for them, helping them express their emotions. And American men are the worst at it, just absolutely horrible. Israeli men are really good at it. And you can look at the correlation between using this emotional language, physical touch, hugs, just these acts of love. And it correlates, I'm not saying it causes, but it correlates well with violence and aggression in young men.
That's a really strong point because there is a Harvard men's study, and what it found was for men over the span of their lifetime, the greatest predictor of a happy life was that they had loving and supportive relationships. And when they faced tough times in life, they didn't push those people away. So there is something inherent about young men, having healthy, supportive, nurturing relationships to help them to develop the inner conflict that they experience versus when we talk about a lot of the violent men that make headlines, they're very isolated. They're very cut off. They have great difficulty with relationships. So there's got to be a strong correlation there in terms of, when you don't think anybody believes in you or cares about you, why would you care about anybody else?
That's right.
Thanks for watching this Being Human segment from the Shrink Tank podcast. To watch the full episode, click here, or to check out previous episodes, click here.